While you're in the middle of a dungeon crawler, have you ever wondered, hey, why can't I take all these items back to town and just set up my own shop? Why do I have to sell to that NPC shopkeeper over there, who's giving me 10% of what they're worth and blatantly just profiting off of my hard work? If you have ever thought about that, maybe you'll like playing through Moonlighter, a game which follows the story of Will, who by day runs a store selling the fantastical artifacts recovered from dangerous dungeons, and at night, he crawls through those dungeons, defeating powerful bosses to obtain the artifacts he'll sell tomorrow. Moonlighter pulls you in with a really well thought out premise, and I think I'm going to let the game speak for itself here. The thing that I love the most about this is it all makes sense. In a fantasy world, towns would crop up, and there would be an economy around artifacts obtained in dungeons. It also makes sense that governing bodies probably wouldn't want adventurers running off and getting themselves killed. So regulations would come in regarding adventuring. If it's too dangerous, you might be banned. Who knows? Maybe there's an adventurer's license. And you can only go to certain dungeon levels based on that. I feel like a lot of games overlook these mundane bureaucracies because they'd be kind of boring to roleplay through. But personally, I found the added realism here to be refreshing, even if it doesn't really hurt you in terms of gameplay. In fact, right from the start, Moonlighter throws you directly into the action. You begin within the dungeon, and I immediately noticed how the simple art style makes it very easy to see enemy movesets, how the music creates an atmosphere, and how you immediately get a feel for what the game has to offer, including the fact that you're going to die. That's unavoidable. And so you better start getting good if you want to progress. After this, you're taken to the Moonlighter to recover, where you find out about Will's family and the legacy left behind by his parents. You'll be taught how to sell various artifacts, the fact that customer appetites are voracious, so don't worry, the more you sell the better. It's a quite refreshing change of pace to find out that there was a shop sim built into what I thought was just a retro-style indie dungeon crawler. The shop sim mechanics are pretty simple. You set prices for artifacts, and customers will purchase the item if the price is right. If it's too low, well, they'll buy it anyway, but you won't get as much money. If it's too high, they might refuse to purchase and leave in anger. Or they'll buy it begrudgingly, lowering the item's demand and thus its price for a few days. As you make money from sales, you can use it in combination with various artifacts to craft equipment, or enchant that equipment. This will give you more health, speed, damage, and defense, allowing you to crawl further into the deepest, darkest dungeons. Or, of course, you can spend it on upgrading the town, bringing in new wealth, other merchants, and some other interesting surprises, especially once you start to upgrade the Moonlighter itself. But beware, selling isn't always that easy. And Vinoka doesn't seem to have any police officers, nor laws to prevent theft, so watch out for those shifty figures looking to grab the goods and run. Luckily, Vinoka doesn't have any police officers, or many laws in regards to assault and battery, so you won't be charged when you jump in and get a little bit physical while removing those goods from the thieves' grubby paws and evicting them from your premises. Then at night, Will becomes a dungeon crawler. And this is where Vinoka's 4 iconic dungeons come in. I guess that part might have been pretty obvious. Each has its own unique enemies, and at the end of each floor, you'll encounter a healing pool followed by a guardian fight. The guardian fights are the same in each individual dungeon, meaning there's only one guardian within the golem dungeon, but the second time you encounter it, the guardian will be significantly stronger. If you defeat the guardians, you'll be able to journey deeper, and maybe challenge the boss at the deepest part of the 3rd level. I like the way that enemies in different biomes don't feel like reskinned clones of each other. They have different mechanics, and you have to think about countering them differently. Speaking of doing things differently, the game has 5 weapons, and each weapon has its own unique strategies and playstyle. My 2 favorites were the Greatsword and the Sword and Shield. With the Greatsword, you can charge up a massive spin attack that grants you iframes, allowing you to stand in enemy attacks, completely ignoring their damage while dealing a massive amount of your own. However, the default attacks are slow, and will often leave you vulnerable. On the other hand, the Sword and Shield have a fast attack combo, which chains together really well. But the special won't do any damage. Instead, it allows you to block. Now, get hit too much, and your guard will break, but use it at the right time, and you can deal with most enemy attack patterns. If you ever need to avoid something in a pinch, you can also dodge, and that will give you iframes, but can also put you in far more danger than where you were before. Overall, combat in Moonlighter has a great flow. You can read enemy attack patterns clear as day, and fall back on potions if you make a mistake. But be warned, the game isn't super easy. A lapse in attention will definitely send you back to town earlier than you expected, minus some of your prized possessions. On the other hand, if you loot a dungeon level and want to escape with those sweet profits, you can use the Merchant's Amulet to head back to Renoka and open up the Moonlighter to sell your haul to the valued customers. Now, before I give my thoughts on the game as a whole, a quick reminder that if you've been enjoying the video, please leave a like, as that's a great way to help me out and promote this video to other people who might be interested in the game. For indie reviews, game news, and much more, be sure to sub to the channel and ring the bell to be notified whenever I upload. If I've already convinced you that Moonlighter's perfect for you, maybe consider buying the game through my Nexus. It's the same $20 as it is on Steam, but a portion of your purchase will go to directly supporting the channel. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members for the continued support, but more about that at the end. For now, let's get back to talking about Moonlighter and why it was such a refreshing title. Personally, I love the way it blends the shop sim and dungeon crawler genre. And there really aren't enough shop sim games to begin with, so any more of those which aren't pay to win is always nice. If you want to see the history of a much more pay to win shop sim game, then click through the card right now to see why Swords and Potions was so influential on the genre. But Moonlighter adds a nice sense of realism to the gameplay, grounding it in the reality that if adventurers are gathering rare materials, it makes sense for an economy to rise around that. It makes sense that if a dungeon exists, inevitably, people are going to be taking their chances in search of profits and glory, or maybe just to see what's beyond that fifth door. And if people don't return from that, it makes sense that eventually the government would shut down dungeoning, and the town would fall on hard times. I find that many old-school dungeon crawlers can get a bit exhausting, or maybe a tad monotonous. As you fight level after level, wave after wave, the enemies just start to blend together a little bit. But on the other hand, optimizing profits in a shop sim is a great way to relax, unwind, and take a break from that dungeon fighting. Unfortunately, it does get a little bit boring if you don't have any goals. I mean, maxing out your currency is fine and all, but it's not really that engaging after a point. In Moonlighter, you want to be selling items to make enough money to get better gear, and you want to go into the dungeons to get better items to craft the gear to sell for profits. As you go deeper, you'll unlock new dungeons, fight new bosses, and get even closer to that mysterious fifth door. Much in the way that a roguelite tempts you to do just another run, Moonlighter functions in much the same way. You don't feel like you're grinding materials or EXP. You're returning to the dungeon to restock your shop. And when you fail, it doesn't really feel that bad, because you know you can always come back tomorrow. Moonlighter also has a quite nice pet system, where, as you're fighting different enemies, you can find an egg, and this egg will give you a miniature version of the enemy. One of my favorites was the Mimic, because I could store a whole bunch of items. And this gets me to one of my favorite systems in the entire game, the Artifact Curse system. Because you're not just getting loot, you're picking up cursed loot, and that cursed loot adds its own complexities. It becomes a sort of inventory Tetris game, because some items have curses, which mean they can only be placed at the far left or right of your inventory. Others can only be placed at the top or bottom. Others still can be placed anywhere you want, but they'll destroy items in a given direction. And there's even a few special artifacts, which immediately warp something to your stash, remove a curse from another artifact, or convert all of the artifacts in a stack into copies of itself when you return to town. So a lot of the time, I didn't feel like I was just picking stuff up and collecting it mindlessly in an inventory. I had to assess the value. What did I have storage space for, or what couldn't I actually afford to take back? And which curses were compatible with each other, so I could fill up my inventory to maximize profit while not destroying any items, since it's all fine and dandy to take back that item worth 27,000 gold. But if it blows up an item worth 40,000, then it's not so worth, and if you can't fit both of them in, you might have to salvage one and eat the loss. Moonlighter's systems aren't all that complex. Most of them are really easy to pick up and understand, but they flow together really nicely. The fact that they're so simple is, in this case, an advantage. You don't get confused, nothing's obscure, it all works exactly like it says it does. But at the end of the day, even if you know how all the artifact curses work, that doesn't stop you from having to make meaningful choices when you pick up two incompatible cursed artifacts because you're running out of room at the end of a dungeon. And if you stay in that dungeon too long deliberating, you might be in for a nasty, slimy surprise, though I'll leave that for you to discover on your own. Very often, when I play a game and beat it, I move on to something else. But after I finished Moonlighter, I decided to jump back in and play the New Game Plus, to see what changed, experience the higher difficulty, and go through the content for a second time. Moonlighter is $20, and it's well worth the money. I was impressed with how well each of the game's systems work together. I love the blend of dungeon crawling and shop sim, while also encouraging you to play recklessly because you are never truly at risk of a game over, leveraging what I think is one of the best mechanics from roguelike games. But what do you think? Is it time for you to open up a shop and try to restore Renoka to glory? Or is this game not for you? And if so, what other dungeon crawlers do you prefer playing? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. Your support helps keep me independent and allows me to turn down things like sketchy mobile game sponsorships. You can do so for as low as $1 a month over on Patreon, or if you want to support me completely for free, then you can join the community by hopping into my Discord, or of course, you can just click the suggested video in the card right now. I hope you learned something today, and maybe I'll see you again sometime soon.